Hello, good afternoon. Thank you very much, first of all, for the invitation. It is a real pleasure for me to taking part to Talking Galleries. I was an attendee before, but I had to say it out loud, so thank you very much. It's, I think, one of the best initiatives at my sense within the art world, within Spain, that we need really to discuss about our industry, about our people. I feel that it is also a topic that has no end. So I hope we'll have a fruitful conversation and a fruitful round of questions about curated gallery programs. So with me today we have Jocelyn Wolff from the eponymous gallery from Paris. I won't introduce too much each one of them. You have the booklet with more information about them. Unfortunately, Ocean World, as we told, couldn't join us today, but we are very greeted with the presence of Antoni Reynolds, gallerist from London that started his activity in '82 and opened his first gallery in '85. And Carles Guerra, actually curator for the Fundaciò Tàpies. Myself, I am a gallerist from Madrid, and I think I am the youngest gallerist here. My gallery is 5-year-old, and I think it's relevant to say it because also I think the topic of curated gallery program, and when it comes to talk about program, it depends very much also, I guess, about your experience within the art world. So my first question to all of you is, within your own context, what does it mean to curate, and what does it mean to be a curator? And I will start maybe with Carles Guerra, who is the legitimate, may I say, the official curator of the table.
I think that is the problem, actually, that we look at institutions as the legitimate place for what curating should be. Whereas the fact is that the curatorial has enormously expanded and gone beyond the natural place of the curatorial. And nowadays one can also speak about curating the apartment or curating whatever, you know. So the curatorial is actually pervading every single sphere, wherever there is art or not even only art. So, I mean, the answer I should actually give is that as a curator, I would always like to insist on the innovative aspects, on being scientifically sort of coherent, on being even daring. But the truth is that when we look nowadays at the actual situation of institutions in respect to the gallery system, the remarkable, the perception I get is that nowadays galleries can do bigger, better, and faster than an institution. So, in a way, institutions, we're being somehow left behind certain capacities. And if I may add, as an institution, one looks outside on the street and one can find plenty of alternative initiatives that actually work with plenty of freedom and agility and flexibility. And even if you look at the actual infrastructures of institutions, very recently in Barcelona, when we look at the commercial stores, the fashion stores, those stores are opening in the most beautiful landmark real property places. Those spaces where years ago one would fantasize institutions should be placed. So, my actual answer is nowadays institutions do have to actually reinvent what the curatorial is. So in a way, I'm not saying this is bad. I'm saying, okay, this is quite an inspiring situation in order to reinvent what the role of institutions can be and what the curatorial should be doing when dealing with institutional space.
So there is something that you are saying, you told at the very first beginning, is that at some point the gallery system, and correct me if I am wrong, the gallery system not mimic, but in a way copy the not copying, but the curator.
Well,
or
it's not just about
integrated the curatorial
exactly.
aspect
It's not just
of the institution within their
mimicking
system.
or even stealing the procedures of institutions, but it is about a rapid cycle of appropriation, which we nowadays witness also in the world of fashion. I mean, when something appears on the streets, next day is already massively industrialized, globally distributed. So this is the logic of innovation nowadays. Quite a rapid cycle that years ago should take maybe a decade or a few years to actually go from the place where one can expect an experimental practice or a more sort of disinterested curatorial procedure. And now those forms of innovation are rapidly translated into commercial spaces and even into the private spaces, which sometimes can be as big as an institution.
Maybe Antoni, Reynolds, you can bring something into that. How have you seen the curating coming to the gallery or entering into the gallery? What's
well, I mean, there are two different aspects to it. I mean, there's curating actual exhibitions, which everyone does, whether they're in a commercial gallery or an institution or wherever. And then there's curating the artist, and curating a career. Because really, the job of the gallery starts with the artist and with the work, not with the exhibition. And you have to devise the best way, the best context, the best space, the best clientele for that artist's work.
Jocelyn, would you like to add?
I think if you think about the gallery program, which is actually the addition of the artists you're working with and the ones you're actively showing. If you think about the program of a gallery and think about galleries as political parties, think about aesthetics, which is like a field where you have aesthetical ideas being debated through artworks or through performance or through even the words of the artists and the actors. And if you really think about galleries being operating, let's say, a political program, which is, then it means that the artists you are representing, they also represent ideas, aesthetic ideas. And I'm a little bit concerned about the fact that you have, let's say, you cannot just put everything all together into a gallery program. And what I observe is that the mega galleries nowadays, all of them are just very successful because of what they call the program. It's actually a way to cover all the segments of the market. Whatever you would be interested in, they have the best, the worst, the old, all. And for me, in my reading of art, there are lots of contradictions. For me, you cannot work with an artist to promote this kind of idea and this one who has opposite ideas without losing your coherence. So for me, they are really, I see these kind of galleries like Marianne Goodman would be like the role model, the new very successful gallery, which is also dealing with a very coherent approach is maybe Kurimanzuto, which is a mega gallery, but with a program, and they don't show opposite artists. And I think at the end, the key is the artist himself. If artists want to be represented, let's say, by a political party, which is pro-Brexit and anti-Brexit at the same time, which is like super capitalistic and super socialist at the same time, and if it's not a problem for them, I think there is a problem on the artist side, that they don't really care anymore, or many of them don't care anymore about this coherence, which is really, and to see their own work appearing in a context of promotion with totally opposite positions.
So are we talking about this kind of stereotype that there is on a way, on a side, the curated gallery program versus the commercial gallery program? It is an open question.
No, it's not. For instance, for me, it's not a stereotype that some galleries establish a coherent aesthetic program. For me, it's not. It's a fact. It's not a stereotype. And the fact that all the galleries, which are sometimes absolutely fascinating galleries, don't care about this aspect, is also not a stereotype. I think some of the best shows you see are in galleries like House on Weird. They sometimes do absolutely extraordinary exhibitions that I would love to be able to do, but they show all kind of art. And it seems not to be a problem, and it seems to be even the key of their success.
So would you say that you have a very particular direction to your program, and that you actually look for artists to fit that?
I would say, yeah, I mean, that's maybe not the way. At least I think that some artists are opposite one to the other, and I would not like to work with artists who are in contradiction in the way they read the world in which they evolve. For instance, this morning we had like a very interesting talk, but everything by my colleague from Paris and Salzburg, but all his vision is based on totally different ideas from mine. You know, I don't have this romanticism. I don't think that the artist is purely an individual genius in his studio, and the artists I'm working with, They don't feel that way. They don't feel that it's a solitary adventure in the studio that needs to be brought to the world. They don't speak about masterpieces. It's not in my vocabulary. I would be really shocked having artists telling me, "Oh, that's my masterpiece." It's not in my reading of the art. So we share a common vision, a common language, common aesthetic values, and then we can work together. It's not that I am fitting. I'm much more depending on their vision. And then if an artist says, no, you cannot work with such a, because I'm very much advised by my own artist in my program building. And if I have an artist, no, you cannot show that, it's so reactionary, then I would ask him why. And then if he's convincing, of course I would not consider working with this artist that was maybe attracted by at first sight.
Yeah, you see, I've found that I've built my stable of artists, such as it is, by surprise. I never planned to pick that artist or that artist or that artist. They came at me from left field, and I couldn't ignore them. So one ends up with 20 or 25, I can't remember how many it is, artists, each of whose careers you've got to deal with in their own terms, but at the same time you're trying to make some sort of sense of why they're with you.
No, I totally agree. I think for me it's an organic process. When you start working with some artists, then you grow with more artists, but of course it's an open discussion. I discuss other artists with the artists I started to work with first.
So there is, I guess also that there is, and we all agree that there is different, I don't know if the name is strategies or different line or different thread that each one of us and each gallerist will decide to follow. I wanted to just to keep centering on our subject, which is the curated gallery program. So a gallery should adopt. Do you think a gallery should adopt a curated program? And if so, what would be the benefits of it and the disadvantages?
Personally, I don't think there is a choice. I think that everything is curated by default.
Exactly.
In this world, nobody can really think of a sort of a program which is not being well thought, discursively supported, and somehow advocated in a way. That would be naive to just present the raw material to the clientele, the clients. So, and on the other hand, I think that there is another aspect that we are probably overlooking, and it's the fact that galleries are also penetrating into institutions, because we do need the collaboration of galleries, financially, logistically. So, the issue here is not whether to be curatorial or not, but to acknowledge that there is a much more transversal circulation of money, capital, and possibilities, and that the line that used to divide institutions and galleries, it looks rather blurry nowadays. And if I say this as an institution, at least here in Spain, a country where most institutions were heavily subsidized so far, it would be like taboo. You know, the institution was the sacred, you know, sphere where the market interests would not enter or contaminate. But in this actual moment, this is no longer possible. I mean, the very scenario we have, it is a situation in which we do really have to cooperate and try to do things as best as the best we can within these conditions. And this is not being like unethical or, you know, or operating with a best interest. I mean, it is the reality.
Antoni, Reynolds, talking about the transversality that Carles Guerra was mentioning. Carles was talking about the transversality and how its institution and galleries are permeable and work together. You have a gallery and you decided to have no space very recently. So you are working as a gallerist, and I would like you to.
I'm still working as a gallerist.
And can you tell us more about?
I mean,
how
I do
you
everything
operate?
that a gallery does, but I don't have my own space. I collaborate with other galleries and use their space, or they host me, or I'm in residence. So it's very much a collaborative venture. I mean, I had a gallery I started without a gallery. Actually, I started where I've got to now. So for 3 or 4 years, I was working with artists in the beginning of the 80s and doing shows in other spaces and so on. In fact, did the first ever extramural Venice Biennale exhibition, so I'm responsible for rather a lot of unfortunate things since. And that was in 1982. But I had a gallery, physical space, 3 spaces in the end, for 32 years, and decided to change the model and to collaborate more with my colleagues, and thinking about the advantages of curating work in different spaces, in different contexts, different programmatic contexts, different social, geographical, client contexts. And I could think about what would benefit each artist in terms of the best position, best location, best presentation of the work. So it's part of curating their careers. And I think we should always get back to that it is a long-term continuous job of curating as a gallery. I also think that everyone gets the client wrong. The client is the artist, not the collector. And the collector is maybe a facilitator, and the gallerist is maybe the entrepreneur. But the artist is the client.
Yeah, I agree with this idea of the artist, client, and collectors more friends. You talked about that now you are exploring maybe more than before the advantages of curating, the advantages for your gallery and for your artist of working in other spaces or collaborating with others.
It's good fun too, and it's something which I think that the galleries. I've only been doing this for 18 months, but I've done sort of 5 shows one in Brussels, one in Zurich, one in Barcelona, 2 in London. Got one coming in Berlin, one coming in Paris, one coming in Amsterdam, maybe one coming in Tehran. So I talk to the gallery concerned. It's very much not about popping up in any empty space, it's about collaborating with another gallery. I talk to the gallery concerned and consider what would be the most interesting interjection into their program, and I discuss what would be best for the artist I have in mind. So, for example, when I did the show in Barcelona, we did a collaboration with Angels, and to my knowledge they'd never shown a painter, so I thought they should show a painter. And we brought in a real fantastic painter, 57-year-old from North Vermont, and the show went extremely well. I mean, institutional sales as well as private sales. But I think what it did, and what this venture does in general. It sort of creates an event which is, is something one needs to take advantage of, because the whole event culture thing has got out of hand, but one can use it and create an event and create something that the normal clientele of both galleries is not used to, so they're intrigued. And it stimulates the audience in general. I mean, we all say that audiences for galleries is down, except for Tadeus, who seems to get, what was it, 20,000 people in Pontin? That's where they're all going. So anyway, I mean, a curator essentially selects work, takes care of work, and makes it available for interpretation, rather than necessarily interpreting it themselves, but we should make the interpretation possibility available. And that's what one's doing with one's artists throughout their whole career.
Jocelyn, about curating your program?
I mean, I told you a little bit about how I feel about it. For me, it's really a process, which is really, you start, I mean, the way I started, my very first artist was Clemens von Wedemeyer, and when I approached him, he was still a student at the Art Academy in Leipzig, and he asked me, okay, would love to participate in your gallery program, who are the other artists? And I said, you are the first. You have to start somewhere. And then out of this conversation you nourish with your artist, you also change yourself, you evolve some of the art, you grow, you develop a vision, or you change your mind. Locally you change your mind. And then you start to see also art a little bit more through their eyes. And that's also how I started to work with older artists afterwards, because those were artists who were very important references for my generation of artists. Like, that's how I started to work with Franz Ernst Walter, because I was working with Prince Golam, who are very much about this idea of performance / sculpture, and this is like a very key aspect of my program, this relationship between performance and sculpture. But I'm just speaking about the way I did it. I mean, I think that for me, what I love about the art world, because I don't want to be misunderstood, is the plurality. I think it's very important to have all kinds of voices, and I'm not telling anyone that people should just, you have to follow you have plenty of models. I'm very attached to this model, like let's say the Marianne Goodman model. It's a role model, or there are like many several galleries that was very inspirational for me. Chantal Crozel was one of them, or also a gallery I liked very much, and I just wanted to mention her, Barbara Weiss. She just passed away, but for me that's really a model of a gallery with a certain coherence between all the artists she was working with. I also care, let's say, about gender. I think it's also very important to support female artists. For me, it was right at the beginning of my gallery program. I always thought, okay, I don't want to have a program only representing male artists. So, and then of course the stories are never really, but it was in my mind. I thought it's important I would not imagine having a gallery with mostly men. And that's also because of such values that I am able to have a very interesting conversation with feminist artists such as Miriam Khan, because we share these values. And so it's a conversation between the gallerists, but also all the artists who are part of this program. And for me, it's very precious, but I also but I'm not saying that this kind of gallery are necessarily doing better exhibitions or are necessarily representing better artists. So I think that's because it's more complex. It's not, and I also don't oppose somehow the market and the institutions, because at the end, I mean, the Getty is also very interested in selling tickets and having salaries in certain institutions are much higher than the income of a medium gallery. So it's not, it's more complex, but I think at the end it should be very much about what is the family of ideas that you feel connected to, and are the artists you are working with sharing similar values, and then can you really develop a voice out of as a group, as a family. And this is something I really care about. And Barbara was one of these amazing galleries, really developing a very specific voice, and I think it would be very much missed, and it's very rare.
Yeah.
And for me, this is a role model.
And I agree with you with the ideas you just exposed, and also about the experience when you build your own program. I believe also in the intuition, and in each one of us have followed his own intuition to build and give a voice to a certain group of artists, a certain aesthetic, or whatever you one decide to defend. But what I feel from my point of view and experience is, after only 5 years, which is very few as a gallerist, I decided to work with a certain kind of artist, and at some point I also feel the tension or the pressure of the market, and at some point I also have some doubts. And I would like to know when each one of you with your own work or context, this tension from outside. You talk, Carles, about the financial tension, the limits that can put on your work. Is it something also that, Antoni, I mean, within your whole career, how this tension can affect, and how much can you defend and stay true to what you believe? And
yeah, I mean, I think that the confusion between the public and private sector has got a bit out of hand, I must say. But one understands why, because the public money isn't there. But I think, I mean, I've heard some pretty horrific things said about, you know, artists, senior curators of institutions saying there's no way that we'll be able to show an artist without the backing of a certain gallery. And unfortunately, institutions tend to think that all galleries can be tapped, whereas some don't have any money and some do. But then one shouldn't favour the ones that do in order to establish an institutional program. But sometimes it gets a bit too close that way.
No, I would only say that, you know, I mean, we do need to imagine a more collaborative sort of, you know, way of working, because at least here in the context of Spain, as I said before, I mean, it was very clearly sort of separated and divided the competences of the gallery system and the institutional field, but it's no longer the case. And I think that it's for good, and it's not something to complain about, you know. Although this actually opens to a different behavior, both for galleries and for institutions. And you know, when Jocelyn was actually advocating for the coherence of the overall program of our gallery, my impression is, yes, you know, when you see those galleries, you feel like, okay, they're doing well, they're doing a good job, they're taking care, they're really building up like all these kind of nice package. But at the end, I mean, that sort of coherence becomes very much the signs of a brand, of an identity, and all the different artists get somehow subsumed under the brand of this, you know, moment, this epoch in a gallery. And I'm not saying this is bad, you know, but I'm saying that things happen in a sort of a cycle over time. And we must also look at the effect of those things over time, and not just at the very at first impression, you know. And over time, I mean, those galleries get somehow, you know, I mean, they come across as not being so innovative, and they stick to the old values, to the old folks, to the old friends. They become almost like a family. So in the actual context nowadays, it looks like the gallery is missing the point, you know, by trying to, not just to renew the whole stable, and the good galleries are those ones who have been able, who have succeeded in actually keeping some artists from past years and also inviting new artists to the team, etc. But, you know, I mean, from the point of view of an institution, you also want the gallery to be part of the innovation of the sort of, you know, I mean, bringing new artists and trying to see what the effect is after you see a new artist incorporated with the old ones, and see how that cohesiveness, that coherence gets affected. How do you face new times? What I really like in Antoni's sort of new practice is that you seem to be miscaginating, you know, other galleries. Kind of, you know,
absolutely.
you're already working within, not just with a gallery and an artist, you're working with the whole system itself.
Yeah.
So, you know,
That's
you look
the
like,
plan.
at least these are my expectations, I don't know.
Well, there is something that was discussed earlier today about how our industry, our sector, was getting more and more professional, and how even with the example of mega galleries, how the task or the position, the function in the gallery are more and more divided. Ocean isn't here, but one of the ideas that we wanted to discuss with him and was about the position of the curator within the gallery. Some galleries really integrate a curator within the gallery, and so the gallerist is not in charge of it, as is the case for smaller galleries. Is it something you would like to?
I think it's a new trend now that if you start to operate thousands of square meters, etc., then you necessarily have more distance towards the studio, and you cannot generate by yourself like many exhibitions that you would curate yourself. For me, it's very important that the gallerist remains an artistic director, but your question, actually, the question is. Of this professionalization is also then you have a division of labor. But it's not only about, then the curatorial aspect could be isolated like any other function that were done by 2 or 3 people. I think Marianne Goodman was like a very, very big gallery in the early 80s, and there were maybe 20 people at this time. Now it would be like a medium-sized gallery. So the scale has changed. So appeared the division of labor, and when it touched what you maybe consider as the very heart of the identity of the gallery, the program, then the gallery becomes something else. But you can also, I think it's always good to make, I mean, personally I love analogies. You can see also how look at the publishing field. Now, all the independent publishers, they are integrated in bigger houses. It doesn't mean they lost their curatorial or their editorial independence, but it's still not the same thing to be, you know, Gallimard and Flammarion, and you have like a duopole. And I think that there is a cultural loss whenever you lose lots of independent voices. I mean, the cinema in Hollywood, it's a typical example. I mean, most of the films produced are not really interesting. A couple are, but it's very rare. And it would be a drama if independent cinema would disappear. And I think you can think about other industries, cultural industries, and I really care about diversity. I don't care about having Walmart galleries, or as long as you have the épicerie fine next to it, doing its own thing. But it becomes problematic when the épicerie fine becomes a rayon, just an element of the Walmart. And this is actually our times. So I'm a little bit worried about it.
Yeah, I think that it is good to keep what you said, you know, I mean, the idea of maintaining diversity and heterogeneous forms of presentation of what the art world does. And but there is also a tendency to kind of fuse and blur the lines between one and the other. I mean, it's a natural tendency, so it's just trapped.
Yeah, but it could be, it could be regulated like everything else.
Mm.
Many things could be regulated or not. I'm always giving the example. I mean, for instance, Paris is one of the few cities left in the world with lots of bookshops everywhere, independent bookshops. Just because you had a law by Jacques Lang, and it was of course shocking for hardcore capitalists. You should not regulate. Prix unique du livre, unique price for books. So independent bookshops and big chains would offer books at the same price.
Right.
And this is regulation. And it was clever regulation. And do you think it's better to have like a city like New York where you have no bookshops anymore, almost nothing left?
Mm.
For me, I don't want to live in a city
Right.
with no bookshops, no cafe, and this is what we want or not. And it's the same with galleries. Do you want to go to Paris and you have 3 galleries, or do you want to Paris and there are like 200 galleries? You don't need to go to the 200s, but you can choose. I think it's so important. And it can be lost very fast, and it could also be regulated very easily.
Yeah, maybe it's time for the questions.
Regulated is a really dangerous word. I'm sorry.
Please, it's okay.
Regulation is a very dangerous word. Probably not so much in Europe, but it really, really is in the States. And it's not because it interferes with commerce or anything like that. The reason is I worked in government and I had to lobby in government, is because the rule of unintended consequences. Lawmakers make regulations and rules about industries they don't really know about. And they think they're doing the right thing. I myself have tried to do the right thing and with the best of intentions and completely messed it up, because laws can be interpreted and changed and worked around, and they're there permanently. It is so hard to get rid of a law. What happens is you legislate over the existing laws. And so every time I hear that, in terms of the art world, I jump up, as you
But
just saw.
you have very important antitrust laws in the States.
Yes,
You can also take all the laws off, and what do we have at the end? You
but
know?
antitrust laws are for real competition between actually huge industries, huge. In the art world, most of the industries have been what we used to call mom and pop shops. That is, they're individual dealers.
Not
That is
anymore.
not happening anymore.
Not anymore.
I completely agree, and I understand the issue, but trust me on this one, the last person in at least America, certainly New York City, that you want to go to is the legislature, because they have really no understanding of the way business is done in our industry. They really don't.
You know, for me, the legislator in this very matter is the artist.
I don't know what that means.
It means that when it's about integrating a gallery or working with a big, you know, when I was speaking about political ideas, do you imagine if you have certain ideas? Because art is also about ideas. We should really always keep this in
Always.
mind. And then, do you want to work with people who are totally romantic when your work is anti-romantic, or you just don't care? And if you care, and some artists care, and the artists who were working with Barbara Weiss, they did care about a certain program, and they felt home in a certain context. And I think the only regulation is the artist. They are perfectly free to say, I'm interested in this gallery because it promotes this kind of vision, or to say, I absolutely don't care. So there is, regulation doesn't mean that it has to come from the government, but you have always a kind of regulation, but it doesn't mean that it has. I really think that the role of the artist in also determining the ecosystem they have also responsibility about shaping their ecosystem. This is what I'm talking about.
Well, that, is this legitimate?
Yes, it is.
That I completely agree with. However, it is not what we've seen in the last 15 to 20 years. We've seen the reality, I suppose, of some galleries offering great deal of money to artists who feel in the end that's what they want. And we've seen it over and over again happen, and it has affected medium-sized and small galleries who have developed an artist's career. And I'm not a pro or against, but I don't have what the romantic idea of the artist who is interested only in principle, the work, and the politics. I think that era, the one I grew up in, is gone, frankly. And what I see more and more, and I'm sorry to say, are artist entrepreneurs. And
There were always some who were.
Yeah, I think to
well, that may be, but it's more prevalent, at least to my experience, than when I started.
I think each gallerist also chooses in a way with which artist, what kind of artist we want to work, and I hope it is the case with the professional around. I found it interesting that we are talking. I always felt in this conversation it's always one way the market or financial pressure versus something more ideal or romantic, but I doesn't feel that neither my practice as a gallerist and the relationship I aim to have with my artist is romantic, but I don't know how it is.
No,
It is
I mean,
always for me very complicated to touch all the frontiers are very blurry and
Yeah, well, if I have to jump into this discussion, I mean, first of all, I would also be against regulation because of the tendency to homogenize and to ignore the heterogeneity of the different, agents in the art world, in whichever cultural field. But yes, I'm in favor of some kind of protective measures because, I mean, we do have a perception of art production, cultural production, as a cultural production that is not just born as an enterprise. Sometimes it is born out of very meager production conditions, out of precarity, and then what we will see is how those practices how the content of those practices gets appropriated by more robust economies. So we do also need to have different economies within this art world. I mean, it's not that I'm saying that we have to maintain precarious forms of production, but at least we have to allow them, to survive and to have a life on their own, so that, they can become part of something else in the future. So in my idea, I would agree with Jocelyn. We really have to try to keep different scales of cultural production in relation to the market, and not just imagine like one only, form of doing business.
Antoni?
Well, I agree.
I don't know how we're going of time, if you want. It's not working. Okay. Should we open to the public, to the ground, the question, to the floor? David's here. No.
Oh. Hi? Yeah. I'm Maria. I come from Venice, and I come from European Cultural Center. We have a lot of educational programs. So I wanted to link actually the discussion to this need to create a new public and to educate the public so in the future galleries can exist and make money. And I wanted to ask you, when you're thinking of the program, do you actually, what's the priority? The gallery's identity, the clients, to intrigue them, to attract them, and is this need to create new clients and take risks to go to a new public is ever on the agenda even, or it's not a priority at all?
Well, it's definitely a priority to expand the public for your artists, but not to fit the artist to the public. But I'm interested in expanding audiences, absolutely. And I think it's part of my responsibility as a gallery to do that.
Jocelyn?
I think we got an answer which is very clear.
And for an institution, I think that it is a priority to not just to increase the number of people or publics, but also to identify different expectations in the public and to actually, diversify as much as you can that notion of the homogeneous entity, which is usually called the public, which is kind of an important task.
I think what is very important is to address or build an audience which becomes or is sensitive to artistic research. And I think for me, the gallery is really a space where artists experiment, because it's really the room after the studio. And if you you can really try, and the artists are very interested in meeting with this specific public, because they also need to address the work to someone. I mean, the artwork doesn't exist without this public. And this is actually, for me, the best way to work with important artists to deliver a certain quality of audience. So it's really, and it means all the artists, art students, collectors, researchers, but I really make a difference between people who consume art very fast without a certain sensibility for research and people who love research. And I think that's the same for a curator. I mean, you don't necessarily need to know that the show was seen by hundreds of thousands of people, but you care about certain professionals who are sensitive to certain aspects of your curating work. And I think I always see artists, but also curators, in the way also as cultural producers, being so sensitive to this very audience.
And I also believe that, we say the public, the audience, and it's still a very passive sort of idea, but the challenge is nowadays to turn this public into cooperators of some sorts, into collaborators. This is the real shift.
Yeah, Mike, I have more of a comment than a question, and you sort of covered a little bit. And I wanted to get back to this concept that that somehow there's a competition maybe between institutional and gallery in the sense of curating. And it seems to me that that's not where the conflict is. It's more of a programming issue, is that your competition is over programming. And a gallery is often much more well-equipped to get, with this attention economy. The attention economy can kind of compete with this market economy in many ways. And that's kind of where we're overlapping. Not so much the curatorial thing. The institution has to protect and take care of their collection or whatever it is, and the galleries have to take care of the artists. But there's this whole other level that we're working on together somehow, or at odds with each other. So that's just sort of a comment. I think it's a mistake to call it curating, where we're conflicting.
In a way, I agree with you, because I also think that the gallery is much more agile and flexible and keen to identify new trends and bring them into the attention economy, as you said. But on the other hand, I still think that the curatorial is a kind of a behavior that is very pervasive and is everywhere, and it's not that you can decide whether to have a gallery which is curated or not. You will do it by all means, because you want to defend your artists, you want to support them discursively, you want to create a certain cohesiveness, out of a stable, so that the identity looks more kind of, consistent. So the curatorial is everywhere. I mean, even in private apartments, when you open up, fashion magazines, styles, I mean, those places have been heavily curated too. So it's something we cannot escape.
I just wanted to say, comment on what Jocelyn said about curating and curating is stable and curating. I think the nature of a gallery is that you curate a gallery organically. I mean, it's not something you don't set out to curate your program. It happens in a very natural and organic way, and the artists that you gravitate towards bring in other artists. But one thing that you were mentioning about curating exhibitions, I mean, for all of us, my generation certainly didn't get into the art world to make money. It wasn't like that. You got in it for the love of art. And it's always shocking to me when galleries not predicated on scale. I work with a very large gallery, but there are very large galleries who pay curators hundreds of thousands of dollars to come into their gallery and put on a show. And they pay an architect to design that show. And, if we're not curators, we'd just be salesmen. And why not? I think it's an organic process, and it's the nature of wanting to own a gallery, work in a gallery, and be part of an artist's the formation and maintenance of a career.
Yes, it is. I agree with you of the organic aspect of building your program.
But it's not the
First,
reality. It's not the reality. You have really, let's look at things a little bit more accurately. You have many galleries whose program is built to cover all the segment of the market. One cannot say it doesn't exist. Why insisting about this, this very idealistic perspective? I grew up my program organically, but not all the galleries do. And I'm fine with it. But let's stop saying that it's always the case. It's not true. You have also this tendency to represent each country. Whenever you have new money being made in a new country, suddenly you have an artist from this country in the program of the gallery. Come on. We are between us. Now we have to discuss things honestly. And it's not true that it's always organic. It's not true.
The development of it.
Sorry, excuse me, Antoni. I think that if we come back to the early days, even taking the example of Tadeusz Ropak, who was here this morning, in the early days it was very much organic. Now I agree that at some point when, it was more about encounters.
It was not organic.
It was about encounters.
Warhol in the early 80s was an absolute star already, and I really think the old days, people were also thinking in terms of marketing strategies. You had very successful artists, Picasso, Bernard Buffet in the 50s. They were even more known than Kunz today. I think Bernard Buffet is a very good example. I think he was even more known by the person in the street than in Germany, for instance, than Kunz nowadays. So let's not always refer to these old times that actually were quite different from what we are describing so far.
Mm-hmm.
And you have lots of galleries. So I tell you, this whole thing also about Africa, of course, now you have lots of new wealth in Africa, and this is also why you have now new art fairs and collectors, especially collectors from the Western world. They want to pick up the African artists before a community of collectors emerges in Africa with the intention to resell these artists to them later on. But
let's not
be
just
naive.
generalize, but specifically in the case of Africa, it's one of my territory. But I do believe that, yes, there is some people that would like to take advantage on a trend or a financial aspect for very few people, I have to say. But on the other hand, there is also maybe something more socio-political, maybe a generation that has grown, maybe also the market that our society, everything. For me, working with African artists, North African artists, Middle Eastern artists, which is what I do, which is for some might be a trend, for me is more personal reason. my
For
roots,
you, yes.
from where I am. For Toya Elglaoui, who founded the fair, the African Fair 154, I do believe also she's more or less the same age than me. And I do believe also that there is, at some point, she's the daughter of a very famous painter. And there is the need also to give room for her father, to give room, to give visibility for her roots, culture, generation, as I fight from Madrid to show a program which is, in fact, to an audience that is not, that is total. My program is really new for people, less and less, but in Madrid, when I opened in 2011, I just show North African and Middle Eastern artists. I show now also artists from Islamic countries like Pakistan. So I'm in front of an audience that is really not, I won't say ready, it's not the proper word, but it's something. So I don't know, I don't like to generalize, and I really believe, maybe I'm too naive. I believe that there is good in every decision, and everything is not driven by market or by money in this world. And I hope I need some kind of optimism right now. Another question?
Yes, I'm kind of going to merge again two things. One is education, mentioned before, for new audiences and new collectors. And the other one is the gallery as institution example. I used to work in a cultural center in Serbia for 3 years, and we had from philosophical debate to performance to theater to music to, and I like very much the interdisciplinarity of it. So can we go back to this Soviet avant-garde idea that art should be everywhere, or maybe kind of what you were saying, Jocelyn, before about the unity of the voices? Maybe it doesn't have to, in order to penetrate other audiences, maybe, or maybe it's a bit utopian, I don't know, but maybe you can have in the gallery artists that are trying to explain an ideology, but then you also have one night a rock group that has lyrics that are kind of also in that ideal, or one day you invite a novelist, and you know, because maybe the person that likes literature doesn't necessarily like art, then you have people that like all aspects of culture, but you know, trying to approach from different areas. Maybe these models exist. I'm not aware of many of them. But I enjoyed very much, for example, in Angel's gallery, all the philosophical debates that were taking place. And yes, I know that some galleries are doing this, but how can the gallery space become even more of a cultural center that kind of delves into not just the art, but more aspects and other industries that are interrelated to a certain topic or a certain ideology?
I think it depends where you are, because if you are like in Paris, you have already so much cultural competition, and you have so many places that do debates. I mean, it really depends where you are. You cannot really develop a model that would be, I think if you are a gallery in a place where there is like a void for intellectual debate, I think the gallery can take many, many different roles and can fulfill this void or desire and build an audience. But if you are like in a place where you have already like very active universities, already a plurality of institutions having different visions, I mean, then the gallery, for me, for instance, I never considered that I have to publish. I come from publishing. I'm very attached to the idea of publishing, but I don't necessarily think that it's the role of the gallery to publish for every show. I think it's much better to support independent publishing houses whenever they do a project with an artist you are working with. I don't think that everything should be always integrated or dealt with in the gallery. And you can be also a very silent partner or many people you care about. You don't need to always bring everything back to the gallery, but it really depends where you are. And I'm not in Serbia. I think it's totally different. I've never been to Serbia, so I cannot answer. And what I am very conscious about is that, like in the Eastern Europe, what I'm very interested in. But for me, it was not that nothing happened before '89. I mean, there was always a vibrant culture, also in the communist times, and not necessarily less interesting than what was taking place elsewhere. The artists were already communicating it. I mean, the world was already very globalized, art-wise, but for sure, you have some areas where there is a need, where galleries can contribute in a very efficient way and be really the center of cultural life. But it depends where you are.
No, I would agree with Jocelyn. I mean, it depends exactly where you are. But again, going back to the idea of galleries doing lectures, etc., I think that it is a real need. Otherwise, I mean, the object is just a raw material. And if you want it to be a commodity with a certain surplus value, you really have to work on it, and you would be naive otherwise. And this is the beauty of art, you know. I mean, objects are objects, but then objects which are placed in certain contexts of discussion, they are more valuable, more interesting, more appealing. And this is also worth for an institution. I mean, I do have to work on revealing the entanglement of the institution within the economy of the city. It's not something I have to kind of leave aside or ignore. I do really have to reveal how the institution is operating in the urban economy. It's not just an accident that we are placed in the middle of Barcelona in a massively touristified city and more threatened by all these luxury stores that one day will probably have art presented in a much more fastuous way than we are capable in our own institutions. So this is part of the game, and we better be realistic about it.
Hi, I'm Simon Le Puré. I loved what this young lady said from Serbia. I've been once only to Belgrade. I had a fabulous time there. But we heard this morning how despite globalization, despite everything, the art world is still infinitesimally small. It's very, very small. And if we don't want to do an effort of widening it, who else should do that? So I think I love your idea of having rock concerts, of having literature readings, of having book launches, etc., and mixing it all up. Because whenever you do, that's when you gain new people. That's when you go beyond the small constitution of insiders who are insiders in any case and will always be there. So I know in the auction world, in the past, we tried to do pop concerts, we tried to do lectures. I remember inviting Jeff Koons at the time of La Cicciolina to give a lecture at Sotheby's. There was one lady who was so shocked by seeing these big images of La Cicciolina on the screen, who walked out and slammed the door. And I thought, oh my God, we've alienated a very important client forever. Well, the next day she called up and said, listen, I'm deeply shocked that Sotheby's should condone something like that. I'm even more deeply shocked that you should condone something like that. But listen, I have a painting that I want you to come and look at. She then consigned this painting for sale to Sotheby's. And quite frankly, had she not been shocked, she would never ever had the idea of doing it. So there are many different ways of bringing people into it. And when you do a direct sell, very often it backfires because it's so clear that you're just trying to sell and you're trying to push something on. But if you show that you care about culture in the wider sense and do things that are not directly related to selling, very often the impact on selling will be much greater.
Well, let's be practical too. I mean, of course, the gallery is still a place to conversation about art and to gather people. And many gallerists work very hard to have the people coming to the galleries, which is not easy as it has been discussed previously. But on the other side, I mean, from my gallery, it requires more than time. I can do sometimes an event. We do organize a lot of talk in collaboration, in fact, with art centers. I don't necessarily do it in the gallery, but practically, I'm not sure we can all manage to do that. And And I think Jocelyn said it very well. It depends really where you are. And I think it's this kind of
I think it does depend
events
where you are to a point. But I still feel that there were more serious discussions 25 years ago than there are now. And I don't know whether that's because it's become the norm, and so one doesn't get so interested or excited about the opportunities that arise. Just like the rest of the art world, there's so much to choose from that the interest is spread much thinner. But I'm absolutely. I don't think it was just that I was more idealistic then, but I was definitely much more involved with more philosophical and art and music and all kinds of things around the art world, however small it was. Perhaps because it was so small, it forced itself out more.
Do you think it would be also related to the question of time?
You mean the period?
Not the period, really time.
Time availability.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the ability to...
Yeah, I suppose that's true, but I don't know. I mean, I know that there are so many opportunities now for engaging with people, obviously in a place like London or Paris or Barcelona.
But I get the feeling that there's not only one art wall now. I mean, that fantasy of one single
definitely
entity.
more.
There are many senses towards as to what our history is. If you go to China, our history is something completely different from what you may understand here in Europe or even in the States. So, I mean, this role has gotten more relativized and more kind of, unstable in a way. But because of that, probably more fun.
But do you think, for instance, that art publications were better 20 years ago, 30 years ago than now? I don't think so. I think we are like living a fantastic time in terms of publishing, in terms of art magazines, the quality, to my knowledge, because I also look at all the publications, because I also work with all the artists, I don't think that the quality is declining. And the discourse about art is not declining.
And also the degree of interconnectedness of the art world with other spheres. It's never been so intense as it is nowadays. And I mean, with academia, with business, with urban planning, with et cetera, and with many other different aspects.
I see a very vibrant discussion and conversation between artists and philosophers, and I mean, I see an incredible quality in terms of like the editorial life today the number of fantastic artist books. We are like in a very, very precious moment in terms of artistic production. And I think the market is, of course, it's just like a kind of chamber where you can hear an echo of what is going on in terms of artistic research, but it has different criteria. And the gallery is directly linked to this vibrant research which is taking place right now. And some of the elements being like invented by the artists nowadays, they may find an echo in the market or not. It depends. Sometimes they also don't produce anything which is material, and I also support artists who don't have any material production. I know that their market may be very hard to build, but I don't care. I still work with the artists.
Of course.
And I think that, nowadays, one can see that there is a great impact of the art world on other spheres of life. As I said, lifestyle, architecture, etc., many other different fields. But the problem is that the revenue of that impact in financial terms is very rarely seen, or at least, this is what we sort of complain here in Barcelona. This is a city driven by few artistic icons, like Miro, Picasso, etc. But then the revenues of that sort of service-oriented economy founded on the attractiveness of those icons, it really pays back to the source.
Yeah, for sure.
And on a larger scale, I think this is quite a drama, because we have not been able to sort of, defend or to advocate for our relevance in the actual economy of these days. Sorry?
Of Barcelona, the city?
Well, I would claim it on an urban scale. On an urban scale, it actually happens. I mean, there is no clear relationship in between what is obtained through the service economy, which, as I said, is very much supported or funded on the very attractive icons that you have on modernism, you know, this kind of very, very broad ideas, but in fact, they work as attractors. And then if you look at how much money goes back to the source of the cultural production in the city, it's very little. It's very little. I mean, there is no clear accountability for that.
Well, this is never easy. If you may, we still have very few minutes, and I think there is another question here.
Thank you. But I think we are here together because we have respect for the past and we believe at the future. I'm sure at this moment there are a lot of young people, young artists, young gallery, young collectors, young art directors, museum curators who are working very hard for the future. And sometimes I think that a gallery, that a gallerist is, I think we have other tools than the artist. Sometimes I try for myself, I try to work with artists, to paint with artists, to do something with artists. It's more than to sell them and I think just that is the research for the future too, because there's not a real answer about our job. I think it's very important that the system and that the officials, the ministries, give chances to the art world, because that's one of the most important things. We need it. And I think this platform here, bravo.
Thank you.
This is a beautiful closure.
Did your job?
No, thank you, Adrian.
Thank you very much.
So just want to thank you, our panelists this afternoon. Thank you very much. Thank you also our audience. It's interesting to see that, to hear not only a discussion on the topics, but to hear different positions on within the gallery profession. So from our panelists and from you as well in the audience. So now we invite you to take a coffee upstairs again, and you're invited to tour around the exhibitions at the MACBA with director Ferran Barenblit, chief curator Tanya Barson, and artist Antoni Miralda to two of the temporary exhibitions right now. And later tonight we have the welcome reception with your accreditation badge. Yes, you can access at the Hotel Alma. And tomorrow we have our second day of the symposium. We wait here to start at 10 o'clock because our panelists will have to rush one of the panelists, to the moderator, will have to rush to the airport. So I would appreciate to start on time tomorrow. Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
And enjoy.